Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to Forest Focus. The January transfer window is now firmly open, and Nottingham Forest are, of course, in the headlines with rumoured deals ins and out to come in the next month. So we'll discuss the best, the worst, and the maddest in the company of, first of all, Pete Blackburn. Pete, Happy New Year, as I said. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Happy New Year to you, to Mikey, everyone watching and listening. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm a bit sort of weary now. I guess everyone's probably got this couple of weeks of festive frivolities, and I just need to sort of be in a quiet, dark room for a little bit. But yeah, I'm good, thanks.
I need to be in a room with much less food, certainly, or much more willpower. A room full of willpower that belongs to me would be nice, because I'm sorely lacking. Mikey Clarke, Happy New Year. How are you?
Yeah, Happy New Year, both of you and everybody else. Yeah, I'm good, thank you, Matt. Everything good with you? How's the eye?
The eye is fine. Got the all clear today. Went to the hospital. I've got a scarred cornea for life potentially, but it's fine. It's not in my field of vision, so no, all good, all good. Back to normal now. Right, we're going to pile in. We're going to go through a lot of transfer stuff, some specific, some in general. A few charts to show you. So we'll get into that. We'll start with the ins, obviously. I suppose that's what people are most interested in. So bear with me 1 second. I'll put up the first chart. We'll just run through the names that Forest have generally been linked with and discuss the merits of a few of them and a few that we haven't been linked with. Do you know what? I haven't even done a chart for the first name. Slip.
It's a lovely blank screen, though.
I know. The first one I want to talk about is Evan Ferguson, actually. I haven't done a chart for him because I think we quite kind of all know roughly about him. He's 20 years old, obviously plays for Brighton and the Republic of Ireland. His goal record, 59 Premier League games, 13 goals. The average duration of his appearance is 43 minutes per game. So I would say that's pretty good. He's linked with West Ham, Everton, Fulham, and tentatively ourselves. John Percy mentioned him in an article in The Telegraph, saying that he's been floated by his intermediaries our way. Potentially with a loan deal where Brighton would probably want an obligation to buy. The caveat around him, which I'll ask the chaps about, is his injury record. He missed 17 games injured last season. He's currently injured this season. So what do you think about it, Pete? Because all the discussions we have are around Taiwo and his injury record. Is that too much of a red flag for you, or is he too talented to turn down? Would you be interested?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one to make sense of, to be honest, partly for all the reasons that you've already discussed, but also because I can't see him coming and walking into our team on current form and confidence and such like, given that Chris Wood's doing so well. So he's obviously going to have to come here and compete very hard in training, maybe get a little scrap of a chance like Taiwo has had, and then work his way into the team. I don't think there's any doubt that he's got the potential ability to do that. But it just doesn't seem like the ideal scenario for him or for Brighton for that to be the case. I would have thought they'd be looking for a club where there's a real desperation for a striker, and he can go straight into that team and have a platform to perform straight away. So I find it a slightly odd one. I'm not sure whether there's, you mentioned that this is one that's floated by the intermediary, so perhaps there's not an awful lot in it. I'm not too sure. But the injury thing is definitely a red flag. Obviously, he's very young, so I guess it's both sort of worrying and also potentially not so worrying for him, in that there's an awful lot of career ahead of him, and young players do get those injuries as they're growing and developing. And at 21, he's sort of coming to the end of that curve physically, I guess. So it's perhaps not that surprising that an explosive striker might get some of those injuries. But it is also clearly a red flag for us, because we're ultimately looking for, I guess, either someone who can make an impact pretty quickly in terms of this second half of the season and really contribute to the run we're on, or somebody who we know is going to be a long-term prospect for us. So for me, the devil's in the details. I think I'd be pretty concerned about Forest doing a loan deal with an obligation to buy that didn't have lots of strings attached, whether that was performance related, the amount of appearances he makes, that sort of stuff. Because if we do get lumbered with a player on a significant wage and for a significant outlay who ends up not being fit and struggles to get in the team and all that sort of thing, then that's a concern, isn't it? So devil's definitely in the details. And the other side to it is if there's no obligation, or rather an option, which I think would be the ideal scenario for Forest and for most clubs, I am slightly wary of Forest loaning attackers from other clubs who are in and around us and developing their player for them. I mean, Darren McAntee, the Peterborough chairman, always talks about not loaning players in attacking positions, because that's where his club gets their edge. They bring in young attacking players, they develop them, and that's where you get your biggest markup as a football club. That's your opportunity to make the money and to build elsewhere. I think Forest, in a admittedly much bigger way, are sort of in the same boat in a sense there. So those have been my sort of caveats. But clearly a really good potential player with sort of all round striking ability. We've seen him do lots of really good things in the Premier League, but there are some concerns there too. So hard to know really.
Morning to everyone, by the way. Good to have 300 people with us already, including Rachel, who's able to tune in live for a rare appearance. So appreciate that. Appreciate everyone being with us. Do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. One caveat as well on Ferguson and loan deals is we've already got Moreno and Ward-Prowse on loan. Perhaps we'll discuss them now, actually, whether we will have them. I'll come back to that. But Moreno hasn't been in the squad and might potentially be going. I don't know on that, but it's interesting. Just for Ferguson, yourself, Mikey, I know Chris Aylmer is absolutely giddy at the prospect of signing Ireland's only good footballer, apart from Andrew Omobamidele. I don't know. It's one of those, I think, Mikey, where he's either going to come in, if we were to sign him, and he'll score 20 goals, a season and be unbelievable, or he'll be an absolute flop. And I don't see a middle ground in it. What do you think about it?
Interesting listening to Pete. That I have a slightly different view. I'm probably along the lines of Chris with this one. So let me give you my reasons. So the guy's 20 years old, and I remember a game when Brighton came to the City Ground. I think it was last season, not the first season. And I think they beat us 3-2. He was the best player on the pitch. He then followed up with, I think, a performance against Villa and Newcastle where he just absolutely tore them to shreds. So the guy's young, he's quick, he's still growing into his body. He knows the league. We know what he's capable of because he destroys teams at this level. He's just struggled with injuries. So that's where my head's with it. I see it as less of a risk to get someone like that in who hasn't reached his peak yet. You know what he's capable of because he's touched on it, and he just needs to get over his injuries and get someone like that in rather than somebody that we've never heard of or just seen on YouTube. That's kind of where I'm at. However, I will caveat it a little bit by saying, and Pete made a really good point actually, why do they want to loan him to us? So I always ask that question. I wouldn't be interested in just a straight loan. If we're going to bank on somebody like this that could take over from Chris Wood in 1.5 seasons' time as the main guy, there's no point us getting him up to speed, scoring goals, and then for it to then benefit Brighton next season. So the only way I'd want to do this deal, and it is a deal that I'd want to do personally, is with a future fee. So I'm kind of opposite to Pete. I think we don't do it unless we have that future fee. There'll have to be some rigorous medical tests. We'll have to make sure that, the worst, whatever that is over. But there's a hell of a player in there, Honestly, just look at what he's done. What is he, 19, 20?
20.
He's only young. I know you joked and said he's the best player that Ireland's got, but he pretty much is. He's only going to get better. He was once touted as a 90 million, 100 million pound man. When I watched him, I thought, reminded me a bit of Rooney when he broke into the side, dropping deep, brushing players off. That's what a fully fit Evan Ferguson gives you. It's just getting him fully fit. So if there's a chance to do that deal and we can get him in permanent and it works for all parties, I'd be far more excited about that, knowing what he's capable of and seeing it in this league than I would somebody that I've only ever watched on YouTube. That's kind of where I'm at.
Thomas makes a fair point here. I mean, Elliot Anderson only had one injury. Callum Hudson-Odoi had one big injury and a couple of other ones that inevitably follow when you've had that big injury. But, that is a thing. I mean, let's talk about the domino effect of a potential, even if it's a different loan signing from a Premier League club, Pete, but specifically Ferguson. I mean, are we... Actually, I'll ask Mikey that question. You discussed Taiwo at length. Ward-Prowse, people in the chat are saying he needs to go. He's on too much. We're paying too much for his wages. We don't want him type thing. He's out of the team at the moment. We've got Danilo and Sangare. Certainly Danilo getting closer. Would you send Ward-Prowse back or not? Or do you see value in keeping him?
Oh man, am I just going to disagree with everybody today? No, I'd absolutely keep him. I don't know how much of those wages we are paying, by all accounts, probably quite a bit. But this is the guy, when it gets a bit colder and it gets to those sticky moments and we're in their last run-in, you need somebody that's been there and done it and has experience at this level. So there's no guarantee that Danilo's going to come back and hit the ground running and be the same player. There's no guarantee Sangare is. We could lose one or two midfielders. You can have injuries. Ward-Prowse is probably going to feature at Wolves. He'll certainly feature in the Cup, and he might break into the team from there. We've seen what Nico Williams has done in recent weeks. Just needs to get that shirt. I just don't see any value in us sending him back. I think, by all accounts, he's great around the dressing room and the training environment, and he's got so much experience and talent. Yes, he's not been exactly what we thought, but we've still got half the season left. And can you imagine if we lost one or two more players, you'd be thinking, I wish we would have kept somebody that's been there and seen it and done it and got the T-shirt and got a European medal. He's brilliant on set pieces. So it's been quite disappointing, I'll be honest. I would have liked to have seen him more and maybe contribute more, but we're only halfway through, guys. I don't think we start ripping up what's working. I think we look to get the best out of him, and obviously, he is going to feature because it's, we've got weeks where we're playing 3 games, and we go through February and March. You look at the calendar there; it's back to back to back, and it's hard and it's tough, and the pressure's going to ramp up, and you're going to need those players that have been there and done it. And I think he'll come into his own second half of the season. So I'm still backing him. I think we should keep him.
Yeah, a few people saying they think he's going back. I've not seen anything about that. Same question to you, Pete, but also on Alex Moreno, the other lone player we've got. He's not been in the squad of late. A bit of chat that he's been in Spain recently, and people putting 2 and 2 together. Where are you at on Ward-Prowse and Moreno?
I think for both of them, the decision is not necessarily a reflection on them, but more so on the wider squad building and where we find ourselves in January in this position where we may want to add, and we've got players that perhaps aren't taking up a really, really valuable place in the squad. I mean, with Ward-Prowse, I take all of Mikey's points totally, but the fact of the matter is that he's not really playing, is he? And whilst he may do in future, he may be needed. There are also other players coming back, particularly Danilo, who are going to take those minutes away from him. And I think that ultimately the state of affairs is that James Ward-Prowse is taking up a significant amount of wages. He's also taking up, more importantly, one of two loan slots. And if we do want to do another deal there, he's the obvious fall guy because he's not playing. And I think he's correctly behind Anderson, Yates, and Dominguez in the pecking order, and soon will be behind Danilo as well if his recovery goes as planned. So I've got no issues with James Ward-Prowse, the footballer. I think he's someone I greatly admire for his skills and for the way he carries himself and all of those things. But the decisions to be made in January are about the balance of the squad, what we can bring in and how we can do that. And if we are looking at someone like Ferguson, then there's no other answer apart from that one of them goes. And for me, I think you have to be realistic and say, Ward-Prowse is a reasonable option for that because he's just not making an impact on the first team. Moreno, I've got no clue what's going on, whether there's been a knock, whether there's been illness, whatever. I'm not sure. Clearly, I guess the important thing there is that Nico Williams has come into the team and is doing a fantastic job of it. So right now we're not missing Moreno, I don't think. I think, I guess he gives you a little bit more balance in the sort of natural overlap, but being actually in recent weeks, a lot of our threat has come down that left side, and significant portion of it has had Nico involved, where he has been overlapping and crossing and intertwining with Hudson-Odoi and Elliot Anderson out there. So I don't think that it's an issue having Nico as our first choice left back right now. And as I guess we'll probably talk about later, it looks like Forest are continuing to sort of search around in that left back market for players who perhaps aren't massive names right now, but that they think have got the attributes to develop. So again, same point really. But if there's perhaps a younger left back who we think can be a real long-term option for our squad and someone we can develop and become particularly valuable for us, then I'd have no hesitation doing that deal, because we've got Nico who can slot in there at the moment while they're developing. And I think Moreno's been good, but it wouldn't be something that stressed me out particularly. Yeah,
I think for me, I'd like to see Danilo get some minutes before I'm sending Ward-Prowse back, just to see how he looks and if he's fully fit. If Danilo's available and plays against Luton and gets a couple of Premier League minutes, maybe he comes on against, is it Liverpool and Southampton after that, then I'm not averse to sending Ward-Prowse back. Not that, like Pete says, nothing against him, but it's a pecking order. Moreno, or left backs in general, I wouldn't want Moreno to go without signing a replacement, a good replacement. So if you look at our fullback options, and I love Harry Toffolo, but that's quite a drop from Aina and Williams to Toffolo, I would say. And if you lose one of those, you want someone of good quality to come in, which Moreno is. So I'm perfectly happy to keep Moreno if all parties are on board with that. But if Moreno were to go, we'd have to sign a good replacement. And we'll come on to a player who's been touted. Just quickly, this is going to take ages, but I think this is a fair point that Liam raises, and I was going to bring up as well. Pete's discussed Taiwo at length. So Mikey, Taiwo. I'm still wondering if we're like writing the guy off too soon. We were all saying, Chris Wood was Taiwo's backup, and then people were saying he's gone after 3 games, and now look how the tables have turned. And I'm always conscious of how quickly a player's fortunes can change. Are we too quick on Taiwo, or have we seen, it's been so long since he's scored a goal or looked right that we just have to draw a line and move on if we can get someone in?
No, I'm kind of with Liam. I've seen a bit of a change in Taiwo in recent weeks. I've been lucky enough to go to a few away games, and he has made an impact there. He looks lean, sharp. He just needs minutes, just needs games. Cup's a great opportunity to play him as well. But when you've got a striker in the form of Chris Wood, he's struggling to break into the team. And I think you may make a valid point, Mike. It's really easy to, when players aren't contributing maybe like they were in previous seasons or previous games, and somebody else has stepped up to the plate, when I go back to Ward-Prowse, it's maybe easy to just write them off and say, oh, we don't need them. It's whatever. We have got 2 strikers. One's Chris Wood. He's 33. He's hopefully going to sign, but he will leave end of the season if he doesn't. And we've got Taiwo, who hasn't scored a goal this season. So for me, you strengthen that area. You don't weaken it any further. So I think it's too early to write Taiwo off. Absolutely, the guy scores goals, and when he's fit and firing, he's a handful for any defence. He just needs game time. That's all he needs. So for me, I'd be looking to strengthen that area and keep Taiwo at least until the end of the season. Then you discuss it with all parties, don't you? But yeah, let's not write the guy off. I think some of the comments about he's not looked the same, I think are fair though. I think they're fair. I think he struggled. I think we maybe brought him back too quickly from his last injury. He did struggle. He didn't look quite right. When if you watch him in the games, when he pushes off, just looked a bit sluggish. I've not seen that in recent games. I think he's back up to it. Just needs games. So play him in the cup, play him away at Wolves, or certainly bring him on. Let's just see what he does for the second half of the season. But no, it's another one that I'm backing, not wanting to leave the club, not at this point anyway.
Yeah, I thought he looked sharp at Everton. I know he hasn't scored for ages, but I do think he looked good. Stephen in the chat mentions about loaning him out. I wouldn't loan him to a championship club, but I think Stephen's got a point that maybe you could loan into a team struggling at the bottom of the Premier League or a European club and see how he goes. That might be useful to him. Right, we're going to talk about some strikers that we've been linked with and a left back, but just before we do that, a word for the Trent navigation. So it's Wolves v Forest coming up on Monday night, obviously, and we'll preview that in full tomorrow. Join us at the Trent Nav on Monday. Wolves v Forest, £8.50 Peters, 30% off draft, and £3 cask ales during the match. You can watch it on 2 large outdoor screens, and there's the heated big shed itself, and inside the pub too, if you can squeeze in there. So yeah, it's Monday Night Football on Sky, so do enjoy that at the Trent Navigation if you can. Right, let's go on to some of these strikers that we've been linked with, and I have actually done a few charts for a few of these players. So where should we start? Let's start with Yuri Alberto, who's the one we've been sort of going back a while, tentatively linked with. He's had a great season in Brazil, one of the top scorers, 15 goals, I think, and his chart comes up very favourably here. Thanks as ever to WT Analysis. Follow him on Twitter, WT_analysis. Nathan Joyce was on earlier. I did watch that back, and he just talks about how he works the channels, and he's a good all-round striker, a very good finisher. He's a good age. He's 23. Pete, are we talking in principles here of potentially exploring the Brazilian market without going into specifics too much? We haven't watched a lot of this guy, and I've got another Brazilian striker that we'll talk about. But does it feel like the market we should be looking at, even now we're second in the Premier League? Is that still a futile hunting ground for you?
I think it's definitely a market that we should be looking at. I mean, I think the point that you make generally is right, that we can't really claim any great expertise on these links. I mean, Yuri Alberto, I've seen a YouTube video of him, and I've heard Nathan Joyce talk about him. And the other guy, I hadn't even heard of his name until you texted me it yesterday. So, expertise is going to be pretty slim on the ground, really. But I think, well, we've shown already, haven't we, that it's a market where we can have some joy. It's obviously not easy, and I don't think any of recruitment is. There's no sort of magic, oh wow, we found this league that no one's aware of and suddenly we can plunder all these fantastic players. It's hard to find good players, and it's hard to beat other clubs to finding those good players and get them through the door as well. I think we've spoken about this before, but Forest are the sort of club that need to have a bit of an edge on other clubs to get these sorts of deals done. So we've seen, for example, with Murillo, that I think the edge really was that he just hadn't played any football, and we went in really, really quickly. Now that looks like an obvious thing to do because he's like quite obviously awesome. But after 10 games in Brazil, that's a bold move for genuine money, and it's one that's clearly come off massively. I think the lesson overall for us right now is that our recruitment team have some real successes in their back catalogue now, and they've earned a real sort of sense of trust from us. And if they feel like Brazil is still a market where they can have some success, then that all power to them, because I do trust what they're doing. You only have to see with Omar Marmoush that George Sirianos is right on his game in terms of players that are about to explode. And hopefully we can find some more of those. And if this guy's one of them, then grand, because I think for him, I can't remember if Nathan talked about this, but he might have done because it's in my head. He's at that sort of age. I think he's coming up to 24, isn't he? He's 23 now.
He's dabbled in Europe as well. He had a spell in Zenit that didn't come off for whatever reason.
Yeah. So he strikes me, without knowing anything beyond these sorts of vagaries, as potentially the sort of player that we could be interested in, because he's not going to be so attractive to some of the biggest clubs, even if he is in red hot form right now and has been this season, just because he's not done it elsewhere at the age that he's already at. And generally, clubs are looking to do business in South America for players that are younger than just coming up to 24, because that becomes a bit of a risk. They're fairly well developed already. It might be more difficult to translate to another division, all that sort of stuff. But there are also positives. These are more mature players who might be able to handle the change better, all that sort of thing. This is the sort of the joy and the difficulty of recruitment, is that it's vast. There's just so much to consider, so much context. But if he's the sort of player that is in form now and they feel like he could make a translation, then great. And the fact that he hasn't already done it with success at this age might just be the sort of edge that we need.
We'll go straight on to the next player, because it's another young Brazilian. And I'm probably saying this wrong. And again, another player I hadn't heard of, but he was mentioned in the Daily Mail, and a lot of Premier League clubs seem to be monitoring. Kaua Elias. He's an 18-year-old striker for Fluminense and a Brazilian youth international who has done really well for them. He's only got 3 goals in 30 league games, but he's played 30 league games at being 18. And again, you can watch the clips and the highlights of him. But he's a big lad, and he looks a really good finisher. It looks like Mikey, again, without knowing so much about it. I mean, a mountain of potential, and it fits the mold of what we do, certainly around young Brazilian players.
I thought Pete absolutely nailed it with that answer, and I was nodding along. I think the same can be applied to this guy here. It's a market that has been really successful for us. You've got now a core group of South Americans that are forming the basis of our side. So anybody that is interested in coming to the Premier League just needs to look at the City ground and ring some of them up and say, do you get a chance in the first team? Yes. Are you loved and adored by the fans? Yeah. Are you the bedrock of the side going forward? Absolutely. So a young player like Kaua, is it? I can't remember. A young player like him or Yuri, the previous people, if he's thinking, well, my previous stint at Zenit didn't go very well and maybe didn't get a chance, won't be the same at Forest. Like you will get a chance if we've identified you. Proof's in the pudding. History's there. Murillo, Danilo. There's loads of South Americans. Sosa made his debut last week. So we are giving these players a chance, and we are differentiating our transfer strategy to exploit or explore, should I say, the South American market. So I think it's a really intriguing one. I did a little bit of research on both these guys. The previous one, Yuri's, they always say if you have a 1 in 3 record, it's pretty good. If you have a 1 in 2, you're something special. Yuri's got like 40%, so it's kind of in between. So he looks interesting, and this guy's really young, isn't he? So, and I have seen him, and he does look a beast. He looks like the striker version of Murillo. So again, you've got a place you trust because the proof is in the pudding, and the last few signings that we've made from this area of the world have been particularly successful and are now worth a hell of a lot more than we paid for them. So again, I asked the question, how much money we're talking for these? Will it suit? Is this guy happy to come play second fiddle to Chris Wood? Because whoever we bring in, unless his name's Alexander Isak from Newcastle, you're going to play second fiddle to Chris Wood for the rest of the season. So maybe it does make more sense to bring in somebody a little bit younger who can learn the ropes, bed in with some of his fellow countrymen, and then get cracking next season when hopefully we're in Europe as well. So really intriguing. And I know I was big on Evan Ferguson, and I am, because I see what the finished product is. But these two do interest me, and it is an area that we need to strengthen. Because if Chris goes down tomorrow, you're relying on somebody who's not scored a goal all season. So we do have to make moves in this part of the team, no doubt about it. But yeah, this is a good one, interesting.
Yeah.
Can I just add, Matt? How good is that Fluminense kit, by the way? I love those. Those colours are so good.
Definitely. I mean, I must admit that this player is the one that interests me. If we were to bring him in as a long-term option, maybe keep Taiwo around and see how he goes. Really interesting profile of player. Talking of profile of players, just quickly on this one, the other striker we've been linked with, I'm not sure how strongly, but Petar Musa, who plays for Dallas in the MLS. You can see from the picture, those who are listening, who are watching, not listening, sorry, he's a big lad as well, 6'3". He was formerly at Benfica playing second fiddle, backup option to Ramos, who's a top player. 14 goals in 24 games, 26 years old. He's got 6 Croatia caps. I don't know how much. We'll just touch on it briefly, Pete. You did a little bit of research on him. I must admit, it wouldn't inspire me massively. And thanks to WT Analysis again for the graphic. But any just brief thoughts on him before we move on?
There's a chap Mikey and I both know who I think is probably one of the best judges of talent I've ever come across. And he was going through some videos of Musa the other day. And he did say, admittedly, he might be sort of looking for a comparison, but he felt that there was a sort of fairly solid comparison to Chris Wood there. The sort of simplicity of his game, dropping in, moving the ball wide, getting right in the box in those areas. So, again, absolute vagaries, but, it's possible that he might be the sort of player that Nuno might like in that sort of role. He has a history of those sorts of strikers, I guess. I mean, from watching the videos, I might as well have not had eyes, given the amount I learned from it. The standard is so hard to tell. The comparisons are so hard to make. You really don't get a great sense of a sort of target man type striker who's often doing some quite basic things in the highlights. So whether he's someone that we are interested in or we should be chasing, it's pretty impossible to tell. But as I said earlier, I think ultimately it's all about trusting the recruitment team. They've shown recently they can find players who, for whatever reason, aren't being snapped up at the exact time we go for them. We mentioned lack of game time in Murillo's case. Maybe Jota was playing for a slightly less fashionable Portuguese side. Sosa was, again, slightly above that age bracket where clubs generally go hunting in South America. You can list all of the signings we make. Hudson-Odoi's recent injuries, concerns over whether he's going to be explosive again, all that sort of stuff. But whatever it is, we find those players who just have got a slight flaw that puts other teams off, and they go for it. They're obviously doing an awful lot of due diligence, or they're incredibly lucky, which seems very unlikely. So I've got ultimate faith that they'll get the decisions right, as long as the success we're having now doesn't change things too much. I think we just need to go about things the way we have been doing, with that real diligence, real sense of building progression, just adding quality to the team. There should be, if anything, less desperation about us now because we're doing so well. So if they keep on the trajectory they're on, then I'll trust whatever decision they make.
600 people with us, which is fantastic. And I keep saying, just if you take a second, even when the video ends, just to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. then that would be fantastic. Right, those are the main strikers we've been linked with thus far that I've seen. We'll probably be linked with 20 more before the end of the month, but that's why some of this is a bit talking in principles. There's another player we've been linked with in a left back, maybe a little more concrete, Moussa Ndiaye. I'm not sure how you say it. I'm probably saying that wrong as well. 22-year-old left back, plays for Anderlecht currently, was with Barcelona. This is pretty much his first full season of senior football. He did play in parts last season, but he's playing regularly at present. And the interesting thing about him is, there's an interview where he's asked about interest from Nottingham Forest specifically, and he's quoted as saying in Belgian media, "There are discussions, but I leave that to my agent. I remain focused on my performances. But as a championship, I love Spain. My dream is to return there." Always an encouraging start, Mikey, when they say they want to play in an entirely different country. But he does discuss that, there's some links there with Forest. Any thoughts on that one in terms of, we haven't seen anything of him play particularly, but it seems we're shopping for young talents and not. My worry in January was, we're second in the league. Let's try and sign Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously exaggerating there, but you know what I mean. Is this the kind of thing that encourages you where we're looking?
Yeah, Football Manager staple. This lad is, for those that play that game. He's really, really good player. I read that quote about Spain as well and laughed, but. Money and opportunity talks, doesn't it? And the Premier League is the best league in the world, certainly the most competitive. So we shall see what happens with that. I think obviously his preference is to probably go somewhere a bit warm rather than snowy England. But like I said, it's a team that is now shopping in a different supermarket, punching above its weight, whatever you want to term the phrase. We're now looking at players that used to play for Barcelona and players that have got a lot of clubs sniffing around them, which is just magical discussion to have, really. Just think of previous episodes of this that we've done in the transfer window when we're buying players like Josh Bowler and players like, no offence to Josh Bowler, but it's very different conversation these days. But no, it kind of harps back to, when you were talking there, Matt, harps back to the conversation about Moreno. So he lost his place, didn't he, Moreno? Then we were told he was just a bit knackered. And he's not really featured since. And I'm sure I saw photos of him in Spain. So I don't know what's going on, whether he's getting an extended period of absence or whether he's just having a bit of rest, or whether they've decided, actually, we are going to look at a younger option for that left-hand side. We'll probably talk about Toffolo shortly. But at the moment, you've essentially got a right back playing left back. And whilst it's working at the moment, that's probably not a sustainable strategy going forward, certainly every single game. So somebody like this, again, really intriguing, obviously very, very good player. So we'll just see what happens. I just laugh at, I want to go to Spain. Well, I want to go to Spain. It's not going to happen, is it? So we'll just see what happens. But again, it's somebody I've heard of, very, very quick. This lad, by the way, really quick. I've seen him a few times, and again, would be a great asset. So this window is going to be really intriguing. But I'm a bit like you, Matt. We hold a lot of cards here. We're third in the league. We've got a very young squad. We're, renowned for being a very difficult team to play against. And we've obviously got some incredible team spirit there, because you can see that on the pitch every single game that they play. So there's just that little bit of nervousness for me. Just don't bring players in for the sake of it. And they have to be, sound really cheesy here, got to be the right character. Because you don't want to disrupt what that group are doing at the moment, because that group are looking after each other and they're all performing exceptionally high. And it only takes one or two players on big money that maybe don't have the same outlook or ethos to disrupt that. And that's what's differentiating us at the moment, is they dig in, they grit, they hang out with each other, after the games. And we've not always had that. So we shall see. I'd rather us bring in one or two players. This guy's good. Maybe a left back, maybe a striker, and that's it. Honestly, no need to be crazy this transfer window, but this guy's good.
This is the last potential incoming, and it's the most insane rumour, so we won't talk about
No,
you're not going to say
I didn't think you were going to do this one.
I'm not really going to do it. We're going to move on. But I did, in my intro, I did say we'll discuss the best, worst, and maddest. And the maddest is Osimhen, just linked with a Napoli independent site. It's never a good barometer of how many Twitter followers they've got. They've got 20,000 Twitter followers, but I just can't see it. I think it's absolutely insane. But we'll come back to it if it gains any steam. But I thought I'd mention it as just complete an insane transfer rumor. Right, let's talk about. I'm going to say potential outgoings. I just don't buy into a lot of these, but we'll talk about what's been reported. Mikey talks about us holding a lot of cards, Pete, and I think it's probably an important thing to reference. But starting with Gibbs-White, Football Insider. It wasn't by Pete O'Rourke. I place more stock in stuff Pete O'Rourke's writes because he's got stuff right in the past. But Football Insider saying that Morgan is a top and serious target for Liverpool. They'd like to buy in this window. They think it's an easier deal or a more plausible deal to do in the summer. I mean, what do you think? Do you think in the summer that kind of thing could happen? Because around FFP, clubs do have to trade. I don't want to. I don't think we can get into the mindset that we can just permanently keep all our best players, as much as we'd love to. Do you think one of them's going to have to go eventually this summer without us seeing the books, which have been submitted recently, by the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's obviously a pretty key caveat there in that we don't actually know the numbers. So my answer is based on some pretty flimsy assumptions and stuff. I think it's probably quite likely that we will need to do some business on outgoings before June. I think our desperation to do it this last time round suggests that we're going to be one of those clubs in that sort of position generally. We don't have massive revenues and such like, and they have been pretty ambitious in recruitment, and they do pay good wages, all that sort of stuff. So it's not easy to tread that line. So I think it's probably likely that there's going to be work to do on outgoings. And you know what, in an ideal world, maybe some of the players that we're not too concerned about leaving can be sold off to Lyon for £50 million again. Who knows? Maybe that's a permanent arrangement. That'd be nice. On Morgan, I think these links are just inevitable for someone who is now an England player and is coming into a rich vein of form. That's what he is now. He is that sort of caliber of player. And I think he had a sort of slowish start to the season. But why wouldn't a football club at the top of the Premier League be looking at someone who is capable of both being a talisman and a workhorse? He's both maverick and team man. I just think that's such a rare combination, and he's putting numbers together now that are going to turn heads. I'd be incredibly sad if Gibbs-White leaves, but ultimately probably will do one day. But all we can really do in these sort of situations is try and have the right sort of processes and the right performance on the pitch and all the right context around the football club that means that we're in the best position to sell that we can be. Mikey sort of touched on it, but we have many more cards in our hand now than we would if we were struggling at the bottom end of the table like we have been in previous transfer windows. The perception of what your football club is important. The future of what that your football club has is obviously incredibly important. All these things are things that people buy into, and that means the players that we have know about that, but also the players we're trying to sign. It's all it's monumentally important stuff. We now are in an absolutely outrageous position. We can't focus enough on how mad the situation we're in is. But there's also a lot of good reasons why we are there. We can all see that the recruitment's been really good. We can all see that this is a brilliantly coached football team. Just from the very basics of looking at the shape and the distances between the players and all that sort of stuff. And then you add in the environment and the culture, and clearly they're all having an absolute whale of a time. On top of everything, I think you'd be hard pushed to find a player who plays first team games for us who isn't better now than when Nuno came in, and that is a monstrous asset to have as a football club. If players can see that that's enormous. So that's both a good thing for us because it's going to mean that someone like Gibbs-White is thinking twice about leaving. It has to be a right move for him, but it also means that we'll be able to find the replacement when he inevitably does go. On Liverpool, though, I'm not sure if I really get the Liverpool transfer. They're incredibly well stocked in that area. I think they're going to have a fair bit of work to do actually come the end of the season because they've obviously got players out of contract. I think they'll need a significant upgrade at left back. They may need a significant upgrade up front. I suspect they'll still be looking for that sort of destroyer because Gravenberch has been brilliant, but I'm not sure he's really that player. So I think I'm just not convinced that they'd necessarily be desperate for Gibbs-White, given they've got so many options in those sort of more attacking central areas. But regardless of it, we're in a good position. Players will leave, but when they leave, they will leave with, our blessing because they're going on to better themselves or earn more money or play in bigger competitions, whatever it is, and they'll be leaving for good fees because we're in a great place.
Yeah, I agree. I would be absolutely stunned if he was sold this month. Even, Derek mentions 100 million. I mean, that's the kind of money you'd have to be talking about. I just don't see him going at all. And you're right about Liverpool. Like they'll need 2 new fullbacks. Probably need a right winger if Salah goes. They're not going to have the money to buy him. But Morgan is such a good player that I think he could go. He could play for Liverpool and he could play for a good Man City or any of those teams. He's such a talent, and we're lucky to have him. Certainly, we'll come on to another player who feels a bit more realistic in a sense. But Dan Peacock, thank you very much for signing up for membership. Very much appreciate that, and everyone else who signed up lately. There are a few people watching as well, as the Outlaw says, so do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. So also mentioned the Telegraph piece, Mikey, is Anthony Elanga, and it says if Forest get a bid, then a reluctant decision could be made. We were sort of here in the summer when we had the 50 million bid from Newcastle on the last day. It's an interesting discussion. A month ago, people will be selling him for 20 million. Not me, but as we sit here now, he's one of the informed players in the Premier League. If a big bid came in and it facilitated us, and again, we haven't seen the accounts, it facilitated us keeping another big hitter for longer or freeing up money for new contracts for Hudson-Odoi and Gibbs-White and things like that. If you put the whole thing in the round and consider it all, what would you think about potentially, that reluctant decision being made on Elanga?
Well, I think we can probably have a similar conversation about any of them. There are 7 or 8 key players in this side right now that if you took 1 or 2 of them out, it'd make a fundamental difference. And Gibbs-White is certainly one of them. Elanga at the moment is certainly one of them as well. I think you've also got to think, in terms of the money, right? Every league place that you get, that you climb higher up in the league, gets you more cash, right? And I think it's something like, goes up by 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, something like that. So I flipped my thinking around the other way. If Gibbs-White left, or if Elanga left, or both of them left, which facilitated obviously is doing other business. But if you took 1 or both of them out of the team now, how many places would Forest drop? And how much would that cost you at the end of the season? So if we're saying, because the step goes higher and higher the higher you get up. So if we're saying we drop 3, 4, 5 places, there's 60, 70 million quid. So you've just offset any transfer value by weakening your side to get rid of one of these. And I understand about the PSR, you bring players in. So it's a system you have to play, but we proved in the last set of accounts in the last window that we can play it without having to rip up our side. So I think, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, there are other areas that we can change rather than take out 1 or 2 of your key chess pieces at this point in time. We are 3rd in the league. Just like I said, 3rd in the league. Why on earth would we sell our vice captain or the guy that absolutely scared Everton to death in the last game and has got 3 and 3 before that, and no one can handle his pace? Don't get it. So for me, if we don't have to, we don't do it. And we see where we are in the summer. And then, as Pete says, if we have to trade, if we have to move a few pieces to enable us to give Gibbs-White a new contract or Callum a new contract, because they'll have a year left, I think, or we maybe extend or give improved terms to others, then we do it then. Not now. Blimey, we're halfway around the horse race track. We're leading, or we're thereabouts. Don't change things now. That would just be insane. So it's not even one with them 2 that I'd even entertain unless the money is utterly stupid. And I mean utterly stupid. So you're talking like 70, 80, 90, 100 million, something stupid like that, which is fundamentally different. Even 50 million, which apparently they offered last time, I wouldn't even have that conversation. So there's kind of my answer. And I know finance people would say yes, but it changed. But like I said, take these players out of the team, we slip down the league and it'll cost you that way regardless. You know, we've got a system now and a team that is achieving above and beyond their means. For me, this transfer window is about keeping it as it is, not ripping it up. So hopefully that answers your question, Matt. I'm quite fundamental about this view. I don't think it's even one I'd be talking about.
50 million is a lot of money. I mean, I think I'd be having a conversation for 50. I think
it's like two or three places in the league, though. If Elanga and Gibbs-White go, we'll finish 10th. And how much is that going to cost you?
I don't know.
Seriously, look at how much you get for
finishing. I think isn't it? It's £2.5 or £3 million, something on those lines per place. I think, isn't it?
I think it goes up fundamentally as you get into the top 8. I think the jumps are even steeper. But even still, I mean, what does that say to everybody else about us as a club? What, we're going to punch above our weight, get halfway there, and then rip it up? I think that's. I genuinely would push against that completely. I think we just have to keep this team together for the next 3 months, 4 months, and then decide at the end of the season.
Any thoughts, Pete, before we move on?
I think the rule is probably quite simple, and it's easier for it to be simple when we're doing well. And I think the rule is basically you sell the player if you think that an amount of money has been reached that is above your valuation of them and allows you to buy somebody that you've already done the due diligence on, who you think you can develop into a similar position, and it leaves you with profit. I think, you know, that's basically where we're at, and it's where pretty much all football clubs are at. You know, that number for Gibbs-White is quite a big number. You know, replacing his quality and above the fee that we've already paid for him, etc. You know, that does essentially mean it would be a massive number. I don't think it makes you unambitious to enter talks to sell players and such like. I think it makes you sensible. But it has to come as a whole package, right? You have to have the recruitment in place, which it looks like we've got at the moment. You have to have all of those structures and processes, and you have to have a backlog of them. You have to have done the work already. So if Elanga ends up with a £50 million offer, then if you sell him on the last day of January and you can't get a replacement, that's not good business, right? But if you sell him early on in January for 50 million and you've got a player that your recruitment team are hugely confident about for the same price that we paid for him, £15 million, then you have to think about doing that business, because that is how you have to operate in the profit and loss landscape. I ultimately think it's as simple as that. But you have to have all of the structures, and you have to have those processes embedded, like a club like Brighton have had, but you also need the performance on the pitch, because it's much harder to do those things, to attract the players, to get the good prices, etc., if you aren't in a good place on the pitch as well.
Yeah, good debate. I was trying to scroll through the chat, but there's too much to go through. Steve did ask earlier how many spaces we have in the squad, and the answer's 1 before we have to start deregistering. Thank you very much to FPL Black Box, which I think is Mark. It's unlikely to be his co-host Az, who's a Brighton fan, for gifting 5 Forest Focus memberships. That's very kind of Mark for doing that. And do sign up for membership of FPL Black Box if you would like to, if you play FPL at all. Right, we are rattling away. I thought this would take ages. There's still a few bits to go through that I'll just mention and throw at the chaps, just in terms of outgoings that are more realistic. I mean, one that's actually happened in terms of a loan deal ending, I should have said earlier. Isapra Song, who was on loan at Rotherham, has come back. One of our young talents. Didn't really work out for him at Rotherham for, I guess, a couple of reasons: injury, and Steve Evans is the manager, whatever. But there's an interview we did with Chris Brass earlier, which explains the processes of loaning our young players out, which is quite interesting, that people might want to check out. And he was like, people are saying, why are we loaning players to Rotherham? I think Chris said one of the reasons is they create a lot of chances through their football, and even if it's not the most appealing, and that's why he went there. But he just didn't really get the game time that he wanted. But a good young player. So, yeah, take that. We've got players like Joe Gardner as well, who looks like he's come on as a footballer who I'd quite be interested in seeing play Luton or get a loan. Can play wide right, can play centrally as a striker, or I think as an attacking midfielder, and looks a big prospect as well. More personally around the first team, Pete, Andrew Omobamidele, again mentioned in the Telegraph and in the Mail by Tom Colomossi and John Percy respectively, could go on loan to the Championship. Leeds have been mentioned specifically, and also Tom mentioned in the Mail about Toffolo and Bolly. potentially being allowed to go, although with a recognition that they're important parts of the squad still as squad men and squad players. Just brief thoughts on the potential of those lads going. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. I think Omobamidele leaving on loan is the clearest, most obvious example of something that should probably happen that we've talked about today. No issues with him whatsoever. During difficult times, he came in and did a pretty decent job for us. Whether he's got the tools to be a real success as a centre half at this level, I think is unsure at the moment. But to do that, to get to that place, he needs games. And I think the Championship is an obvious answer for him. I think he can be one of the better defenders in that league with a run and a good side around him and such like. And I'd wish him all the very best. Toff and Bolly is. You sort of want to be selfish about both of them because I think it's pretty clear that these are two really decent human beings who add an awful lot to our football club. And I don't mean to say that in a patronising way at all, because that makes it sound like all they are is sort of cheerleaders or whatever, and that's patently nonsense. Willy Bolly was for extended periods of time our best and most important defender. And he added a huge amount to a team that was really struggling. And I think the same applies to Toff, who put in lots of consistent performances. At more difficult times in the Premier League, his left foot was often one of our most likely ways of, creating something in a game with, a decent sort of pass or cross, and he picked out moments pretty well. But I think you have to do right by people, don't you? And neither of those are getting the sort of football that they will want or need at this stage in their career. And if that is how they feel, then I think it's probably the right thing to do is to let them move on. From a selfish point of view, I hope both want to stay out. I don't know what Willy Bolly's long-term plans are, but I hope they both stay here until the end of the season and then think about next steps. Because, as you rightly say, they're clearly very, very good people to have around. Good ambassadors for the football club. Good squad men who aren't sulking and come on and do jobs for us still. We still have needed them. So hopefully they stay, but if those guys want to go, then I think you have to do right by them.
Any thoughts on that, Mikey? Or I just type something in the chat. Does it make sense? I mean, they're both out of contract in the summer as well, Toffolo and Bolly. So do you think probably more realistically they kind of hang around to the summer and we shake hands?
I'd have thought so. Yeah, for the reasons Pete said, I concur entirely with what he was saying. I think when Gibbs-White came off at Everton, he gave the captain's armband to Willy Bolly. And I think that tells you everything you need to know in terms of his standing with that group of players and his standing with the management. So I very much expect Willy Bolly to hang around. And he's been really useful, hasn't he, last month? With the issue that we had with Murillo and coming on for 1 minute against Villa and making about 5 tackles. He had a bit longer against Everton, who probably playing the cup. So I think Willy Bolly's going to be really useful for when we go to a back five. And I think Toffolo is obviously a very well-liked and valued member of the squad, so I think he'll stick around. I'm more inclined to agree with Pete that Omobamidele is probably one that will move off. And Emmanuel Dennis, is he still knocking around, or
he's still our player? Yeah, yeah, he's still our player. Yeah.
We've
got a few.
He's got another year, isn't it?
Matt Turner's still our player as well. We're going to have to deal with that situation in the summer.
We'll be talking about Dennis next January still.
We will. Right. Just before we wrap things up, we're always in danger of going into, people just throwing names in the chat and mentioning them. But this caught my attention. Stephen asks about, good morning from Chicago, by the way. A loan for Kaua Elias sound feasible? Not really. Sorry, Stephen. I think he'd end up at like Chelsea or someone, and they move Nkunku on or something like that. But just on that, Pete, I sort of put it up because it's the markets we're shopping in. I still don't think we're shopping in, guys from PSG who would cost 50 million. I think we're still shopping in the same area that we were before, but with our hands strengthened. Do you kind of agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I think my view on it is that I sort of hope that our market doesn't actually change too much. I don't think that the recent success necessarily needs to change the principles we've been working to. The recruitment team have brought in players who've allowed us to get to this position, and I think they can continue to do that. I think really the thing that we need to be most careful about is keeping what we have, and I mean that both in terms of the actual players, but more importantly in terms of the sort of the culture and the environment. And it is so easy to lose that stuff. This is a really, really precious bit of alchemy that the manager puts together to get your squad into this sort of environment where you have subs coming on who are desperate to make an impact. You have players who are not playing, who don't seem to be kicking up any sort of a fuss. And there's a magic between these players, isn't there? There's clearly friendship. These things are huge. So personally, I'd be massively wary about going out and signing anyone who's a huge name on big money and potentially massive fees, all that sort of stuff. I want very serious due diligence, and I want to be signing players who are coming here to better themselves, not on the way down or feel like they're doing us a favour. We get Milenkovic a move, and it's his chance to make his mark on the Premier League. He's doing that. That's exactly the sort of business that we should be doing. We've done it really well, and I see no reason to change that just because we're 10 places higher up the league than we perhaps thought we might be.
A couple of quick charts that demonstrate that before we go. This is from Kieran Maguire's Twitter feed, and it's talking about transfer fee cost per point in the Premier League, point per £1 million spent. It's not an exact indication of, Ipswich have spent very little money and they've got very few points, but we're second in it behind Ipswich. And I think it's an indicator that we've spent well. When you look at, Man United at the bottom of this, they spent £46 million per point. We've spent a tenth of that, £4.7 million per point. So it does illustrate that we've spent very well, I think, since the end of the first season we were in the Premier League, I would say. I think we've consistently done good business there and good sensible business. And there's also a loans. This is by wages as well, again from Kieran Maguire per point. That we're third in that chart as well. And I don't think it's not a perfect indicator particularly, but it shows that I think we're on it demonstrates that we're on the right track around recruitment massively. Southampton at the bottom of this one, their wage bill must be insane. I know they've got very few points, but they must have overspent on a few. And again, Man United, absolute car crash of a football club, a bottom in that one. I think I had one other chart to show. Oh yeah. Right, a quick quiz for the chaps to finish on. Not a quiz. Right, I'm going to put up a list. This will take 2 minutes. On the screen is a list of players who are out of contract in the summer that someone sent to me on Twitter. And there's some interesting names on. And I'll read out some names that I think are more, potentially realistic than nonsensical. And either of you just say yes if you think you would take any of these players. So I'll just go down it. The kind of players we could potentially sign. So not Ronaldo or Alexander-Arnold. Nelson Semedo from Wolves, Angel Gomez from Lille.
Gomez is a great deal for someone. I don't know whether he's a Nuno player necessarily. He's a heavy possession, but he's a fantastic deal for somebody.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yep.
Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Kyle Walker-Peters.
Yeah, I'd take Walker-Peters.
Yeah, I just said yes to Walker-Peters. He's 27. He got an England cap not long ago. As that kind of squad player that we were referencing earlier. Harry Maguire.
No.
Tyreek Mitchell.
Big yes, please, for Mitchell.
Yeah, I like Mitchell. He's a good left back, good Premier League left back. Callum Wilson. Can I say Will Hughes? He's played for Derby, probably not. Eric Dyer. Jonathan David. A lot of people mentioned Jonathan David in the chat to me, but sign of ambition. I think he'd be really interesting, certainly. Sergio Reguilon. Adama Traore.
Yes, right. I was waiting for you to say him. I've always been a fan of Traore, and I get a load of stick for it. But I remember the Traore under Nuno at Wolves for that one season, and he was horrible to play against. So if Nuno can get that back out of him, then that's something I'd be interested in. But I know he's really frustrating. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I did mention. I did pause on that one because a few people have referenced that. Who else should we say? I mean, Victor Lindelof was mentioned.
Amad Diallo would be fine.
Yeah, brilliant player.
We haven't got to that one yet. Kenny Tete, I think that's Mark in the chat. The Fulham right back. Mark said Tete. Amad Diallo, unrealistic. But how have Man United let a player of that talent get into the final 6 months of their contract?
Nuts, isn't it?
The dross that they've got.
There's one name in there that sticks out for me, and that's Ola Aina. Please, can we do that one?
Well, we're going to finish on that. Ben Davis, Christian Norgard. Good player for Brentford.
Not sure we need him.
Tarek Lamptey.
Injuries. Injuries.
Kieran Tierney.
Injuries.
Yeah, it's decent. He can play left back or centre back. But
Lemina's a very good player and has been brilliant for Wolves.
Yeah, I think he might be going to Saudi this month.
Yeah, I did read that. Yeah, there's some talk of him going to the club that the manager's just joined from, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah. We'll have a Wolves opposition preview on Sunday. I think the day before the game, by the way, with Ryan Lester, who's done it before. Go get a plug in, Pete. But that's two. Fabian Schär and Abdoulaye Doucouré, who's at Everton. There's some interesting names on that list. I mean, I'm probably with the chaps like Tyree Mitchell, Angel Gomez. Those are a couple of players, but I think we'll probably come up with some, Brazilian kids that we haven't heard of, which I'm totally on board with. So yeah, I thought that was just an interesting note to end on. Right, let me just bring up the bits, a couple of other quick bits of news before we go. I know this was taking a long time. Gibbs-White and Nuno are both nominated for Manager and Player of the Month again, so you can vote for them via the club website. The owner has written off, we normally do longer on this, over 80 million quid of loans into shares, which helps the football club in terms of the associated party transaction rules that are coming in around the amount that clubs owners can owe clubs, and all that is really complicated. But anyway, it's a good thing for Forest.
I think interest payments is the big issue, isn't it?
Yes,
There's a big impact to finances from interest payments, so that I think is an enormously good thing. And whilst I'm no expert whatsoever, it's presumably a brilliant thing for the long term of the club as well. If one day Mr. Marinakis decides he's moving on or whatever, the less sort of debt you've got in those situations and such like, the better a prospect you are, right? So it's all good stuff.
Yeah, and he's done this before. This is the biggest amount that he's done it for, and it is a good thing. I mean, obviously, in terms of the owner's backing of the football club, it shows massive investment there in every sense. So that's good. And Kieran Maguire was interesting. He was on TalkSport and he said, and this was really good to hear, Forest are ahead of the curve and on off the pitch. He said at the moment, and that's like properly music to my ears, because we've had question marks in years gone by, and I don't think unfairly, around recruitment when we were in the Championship and the way things were going when we were in the Championship. But since we've been a Premier League club, then I think the ownership have been fantastic. I'm not questioning that at all, and we're in a fantastic place. There was a roll of the dice taken on signing so many players on pretty decent wages, and it's totally paid off. So yeah, we could go on all day about that, I'm sure. Right, we have done a load of stuff, and we're going to record a Wolves preview after this. But any final words, any final thoughts, Mikey?
Yeah, just a couple of things, really quick. I know it's been on for a while. That group of teams that came up with us as Fulham and Bournemouth, I think. I mean, look at them now. You've just got to survive that first season, right? And then try and kick on from there. I think it was those three that came up, and I'm just delighted. And I enjoyed the back and forth with Pete earlier about whether we should entertain. Pete's lovely. I'm far more stubborn, so I won't even entertain some of this stuff. But essentially, we both want, as everybody does who's watching this, we all want the same thing for Forest, which is don't rip it up when it's working. We've got to trade at some stage, of course, but all the things that Pete said a minute ago articulated far better than I did, around team spirit and what you see and what you feel when you watch these group of guys play. We've not had this for a long time. So for me, this next 3 weeks is all about not breaking something that isn't broke, for want of a better phrase, because this team can do anything. So let's just add strategically to it. And if we need to sell somebody big or even two players big, do it in the summer. I'm going back to my stubborn roots. But no, I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said and very much enjoyed it. Pete, any final words from you?
No, nothing from me. It's been really nice to get back to Forest focused business. Particularly enjoyed the chat, and also particularly enjoyed your sort of serial removals of that
the same person.
Burke in the comments, who's frantically continually respawning, which speaks of that. Or if that "come dine with me" quote, what a sad little life. But yeah. All good. Really happy to be back. Looking forward to doing another one after these, you absolute slave driver. But yeah, no, I cannot wait for Molineux on Monday. I'm really excited for it. And great being back in the fold.
Excellent. Great to have everyone with us. 700 people, which is fantastic at this time of year. Really appreciate that. If you've enjoyed this, as ever, do us a favor, hit like, hit subscribe. Do consider channel membership or Patreon, and give us a lovely 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. And like I say, we'll be back tomorrow when it comes out with a Wolves preview. And then Sunday, we'll do an opposition preview. On Monday, a post-match show. And Tuesday, kind of the main show that we do, reviewing and looking forward and big picture stuff. So, yeah, do join us for that. Thanks very much for everyone's company. Have a good day. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.